Okay, so I think it's 4 minutes past now, so we can kick off and record it for those who aren't here. So thanks for joining, everyone. This is just a kickoff call for community developers. We're going to explain the grants program and how it's going to work, and just congratulate you basically for being some of the first to build on Minima. We have another joiner? Great. So the purpose of the grants program is to start building the Lego blocks for the Minima ecosystem. So obviously the blockchain is done now, and we need to start building up utility for the chain. So we would like to see tutorials and MiniDapps built on Minima. And this grants program is to reward you community developers for helping us to build out the ecosystem. And so grants will be given out for MiniDapps and tutorials, and these will be paid out through a FAQ, which is a contract for an agreement for future tokens. And the way that it's going to work is that we'll give you some time to create groups if you feel that you need different skill sets that you don't currently have. We have a channel where you can ask around for other people that other skills that you need. And once you feel that you have a solid team ready, you don't have to be part of a team. You can do it yourself as an individual as well. And then we'll be giving you the chance to select from a shortlisted selection of MiniDapps that the community and the team have put together. So you will be able to choose which MiniDapp you prefer to build, and you will also be able to select one or more tutorials to build on an individual basis or in a team. And there'll be separate rewards for MiniDapps and tutorials. So that's going to happen over the next week or so, and you'll see 1 or 2 surveys being put into the developer channels for you to complete. And submissions for MiniDapps will be on a milestone basis. So, for example, you will get a certain portion of the overall reward once you have submitted a white paper and a presentation, which kind of explains why the MiniDapp is needed and how it's going to work on a kind of simple, high-level overview. And then there'll be further milestones as you progress through. So wireframes, a POC, instructions on how to use a MiniDapp, obviously the code, documentation, and then finally getting to a production-ready MiniDapp. So we'll be providing channels for you to talk with the team or with each other. We really encourage you to work together as well. And submissions will be done through GitHub. And so all of that we will give you more information on over the coming week. Luke, is there anything I have missed out there?
No, you covered it all off really well. I think the only thing I'll add is that whilst we are the actual reward that you would get, the actual grant, would be dependent on the complexity and difficulty of the particular tutorial or MiniDapp that you went on to produce. And that the rewards themselves will be very generous, but they'll be worked out on a case-by-case basis. So we're not going to talk numbers today, but just keep in mind that you will be very happy.
And I think Paddy will be able to talk more about this than me, but building on Minima is a different paradigm to building on any other kind of system. So I don't know if Paddy, you want to say a few words about how they should approach building on Minima? Yeah.
I'll just chip in. Yeah. So, okay, thank you. Well, very exciting, and thank you all for deciding to write on Minima. The MiniDApp system. I'll just start from a high level. So, the MiniDApp system is just a system that runs on top of Minima. So, what's quite nice about that is that this is not consensus critical. By which I mean, this is MiniDApp system v1. So we've knocked this up, and it is meant to be analogous to Ethereum's MetaMask system, which I feel is an incredibly a real success story of the entire crypto space. The reason Ethereum does so well is frankly because it opened itself up to the entire web development community, and they came up with this system where you could write web pages that basically had a JavaScript library, www.js, which allowed you to do stuff on Ethereum. The Bitcoiners have chosen not to do that, and frankly, I'm surprised that so few of the chains don't realize that, this is the way to get the developer community to jump on board. You need some simple interface for you to be able to write applications that somehow interact with the lower level blockchain stuff. But the MiniDApp system itself can be changed, things can be added, things can be removed. And what's nice about it is that doesn't mean people have to upgrade their Minima. And if you write a MiniDApp that requires a feature, so for instance, I have just added file access over the MiniDApp system, so you can do mds.file stuff, and you can save files and load files, etc., etc. It just means you need to upgrade. Whoever wants to use that MiniDApp, the users who want to use it can just upgrade that. They can be the only ones that use it, and then it'll all work. So it's quite nice like that. When thinking about how to write these apps, if I can get a little bit technical with you, with you techies, the paradigm is a little bit different. So, as you know, Minima is a UTXO system. And frankly, all Minima does, the only thing that it does is that it stores coins. So the MMR database is frankly the backbone. Yeah, we have this Power blockchain that operates on top of it for consensus about what happens and which coins get sent to which smart contracts. And when I say smart contract, what I mean is a coin, and a coin, as you know, is basically a P2SH to a script hash. So you get the script, you hash it, that's the coin. What's different about the UTXO system is that you don't get to say, I only want to spend a little bit of this coin. Yeah, all the scripts, as you will know, basically only return true or false. So either I can access that UTXO or I can't. Obviously, we have the covenant system. Obviously, we have the verify out function is a very, very useful function because it means that you can then do sequences of transactions, because you can ensure that when I spend this output, there needs to be spend this output as an input. I can ensure that there is an output, opposite it, so that I can continue to do stuff. Added to that, the really sort of powerful functionality comes in from the state variables, because when you have the state variables, they are stored with the coin and they can be accessed in the next transaction. And because you can check, so you could have state variable 0 is some sort of counter, and then in your script you can say check state proof state 0 equals inc state, state 0 equals inc proof state 1. And by saying that, that every sequence, every time you spend it, you can have a different, an incremented state variable. And then in your processing function, you can say, if state variable is 0, do this. If state variable is 1, so if you're writing a poker game, you can say, first I need to shuffle, then I need to deal, then I need to, the bidding for the first player, then you go on to the next player. And so the state variables, they basically the memory mechanic. It's not a global state variable, so not everybody gets access to that. Only the people who are involved in that transaction get access to those state variables. But that's all you do on the Minima bit. And actually, what I find when people, as I do discuss with many of you, the ideas that you're writing, is that there is the Ethereum paradigm, where you basically have this massive bloated database that just grows in size and that you can just put stuff into and everybody can access it. And that's really not the way that this works. This is a far more, well, in a word, decentralized way of doing it, where you don't all have access to the only thing you have access to are the inputs to the transactions, the state variables, and the outputs. And this is really nice because it means that when you have your transactions in a block, for instance, the whole holy grail.
We lost him. You're back.
Okay, I'm back. It's Windows. Ever since they got involved in Discord, it's been total shit. Anyway, so what that means is, though, which is really nice, is that when I have a block of transactions, because there isn't this global state, each of the transactions is independent. And as I was saying, the holy grail currently for Ethereum is to have parallel processing. And what that means is that when you're processing an Ethereum block, because they have a global state, all of the transactions have to be processed in sequence. Because at the end of one transaction, I can edit some global variable that can affect the execution of another transaction. So it is not the case that I can just take each of those transactions, give them to a separate thread, and say, go and process these. Yeah, because each of the transactions can affect the other transactions. Whereas in Minima, that isn't the case. In Minima, every transaction is independent, and a block doesn't have an ordering of transactions. There is no MEV on Minima. So every single transaction is a separate unit that I can take and I can give to a separate thread and say, process this. What that means from a technical level is that all the inputs, all the input coins to all of the transactions in a block must be valid. So I check the MMR proofs from the previous block. You cannot have an output from one transaction in a block as an input to a transaction in the same block. And what this means is that we are perfectly parallel in that when I get a block, I process all of the transactions simultaneously, and it's atomic in that either all of the transactions return true and it's a valid block, or one of them returns false and it's an invalid block. So this is a really sort of nice feature that means in future, because parallel processing is frankly a very well understood, very old school way of doing scalability. And your phone has 8 cores in it, and the problem is that you never actually use the other 7. It's always the one core that does everything. Whereas the way Minima does it, I fully envisage a future where it might be processing, thousands of transactions per second on low-end devices, because you'll just have multiple cores. It's very easy to add. You can get 64 core phone chips. So it's very, it's going to be very possible to have a really good throughput of processing blocks in future. Now, another thing, that means that when you're writing these transactions, when you're writing these MiniDapps, what I think you need to try and avoid to do is, or what I think you should try and do is always start from the base level, which is if this was a peer-to-peer process, if this was me interacting with someone, how would it work? You don't want to have a middleman. You don't want to have a central repository of data. You want to start with a base primary unit. So as an example, we have written an app called MiniSwap. I'm not sure, we haven't given that out to the community yet, have we? And what that does is it allows you to do an HTLC swap with another user. So you and the user construct a transaction. I put in my inputs. So for instance, I could do it for an NFT. And I put in my NFT and I send it to you, and then you put in your money and you send me the money, and then you send me back the transaction and I sign it. Then I send you back the unit, and then you check it, you sign it, and then you post it. And what that means is that there's a lot of gummer going on off chain. There's a lot of things that we do that don't involve touching the Minima blockchain. You basically never want to touch the Minima blockchain unless you absolutely have to. Minima is expensive. Minima is slow. Minima is clunky, as all blockchains are. So that's not where you want to do your processing. Any processing needs to be done off chain. Any calculations need to be done off chain. As another example, for instance, if you are writing a DEX, you're writing a decentralized exchange. Now, I notice a lot of the Ethereum ones, you do an Ethereum transaction to put your order on chain. That's not the way that you want to do it. What you want to do is you want to have an off-chain order book. What you want to do is you want to have basically a post-it note board where I can put all of my orders and I can remove them and I can add them and I can change them and all of this. And none of that touches the Minima blockchain. That scales. That can have as many as many orders as you want going on. And then only when somebody accepts the order and says, oh, yes, I'd like to swap this many of that token for, 20 Minima, at that stage, the two of you get involved and you do this little, backwards and forwards, constructing a transaction still off chain, and then you post that single transaction. So all of the order book, all of the, canceling of orders, making orders, querying orders, looking at it, all of that happens somewhere else. And then only the absolute bare minimum goes on chain. And so at the bottom of that, actually, what you need, what your discrete unit of processing power that you want is this swap. And then once you've got that thing, this piece of tech that does that one unit, you can use it. You could use that in a Discord group. You could use it on a website. You can use it over WhatsApp. There's lots of different ways that you can then take that little piece of code and then integrate it into much like if you wanted to write a Binance system, you totally could. But you'd write all of the order book stuff, all of the things that require a lot of data and a lot of processing off chain, and then you'd only operate the absolute bare minimum that you have to on chain. The other thing I would say is that the thing about blockchain is that it's extraction of value. This is a very hot topic that I've had a couple of discussions with some of you. How do you extract value from a MiniDapp? So I understand you write this MiniDapp and you feel that you should get something for writing it. It's very hard to basically do usury code when you've got a system like the MiniDapp system on Minima. Because everybody runs everything on Minima, you're not ever really relying on a third party. It's not like when you run a Uniswap application. I know Uniswap sounds like that, but you are going via Uniswap. You're going to the Uniswap website, or when you're using other applications that require you to go through some centralized party, it's very simple for them to say, I'm going to take 0.5%. Whatever it is that you're doing with your transaction, I'm going to take a little cut of that. And with the MiniDapps system, because I basically have the complete source code on my desktop, I've got on my phone, when I've got the complete application, and the person I'm transacting with has the complete application, I can just code you out. So if you try to extract value in a way that I can remove simply by changing a line of code, that's not going to work. The way that you can extract value from a MiniDapp and the way that you can extract value from a decentralized application is what I like to think of as liquidity provision, whether that is provision of a service, whether that is provision of a community, whether that is provision of money. So you are actually going to have to provide something useful. You are actually going to have to do something that is, so for instance, with this DEX analogy that I was going about earlier, yes, we've got the unit where I can peer-to-peer transact with someone. Me and you can transact and atomically swap my tokens for yours in a totally secure way. Great, I can do that peer-to-peer. Where do I find the order book? Where are all the other users that have this? So somebody could say, well, look, I've set up a server, and on this server, you can post your orders, and people can go to that website and they can see all the orders. And when they find someone that they want to transact, they can do the transactions themselves peer to peer. But the order book itself is not something that I have access to as a peer, or that the other person, automatically. And so the order book could say, well, look, I charge you for posting on my order book. It costs you 0.1 of a minima if you want to put an order on my order book, and I have access to millions of users. Great. Your liquidity provision there is that you're providing access to a whole group of users. So that's a way that you can extract value out of it. You don't extract it out of the, you can't just put it into the MiniDapp and say, when you do the swap, I'm going to add a little Minima output that sends me, sends some Minima to my address, because I can code that out. So a good way of thinking about this is imagine you as a coder. There's other coders out there who know as much as you do, who know everything that you know about the application. Can they remove that? Obviously they can. Now I can't just remove the address book. It's like I need an address. I need this order book where I can post my my transactions so people can go there and look at it. So when I have my interesting discussions with Mothri about StabD and this shop, and it's like, if you're trying to write a decentralized version of Amazon, Amazon is totally centralized, and obviously when you sell stuff on Amazon, they take a cut. There's nothing you can do about that because they're the ones that host it. Now, if you're trying to come up with a decentralized version of that, and peers are transacting peer-to-peer, it's not possible for you to just put in a cheeky little 0.5%. But what you can do is you can say, well, actually, I provide, a meeting point. I provide liquidity of users So this is where people can go and find different items. They're all, different shops, different, where do I go to find this information? That is something that I do not have as a peer and that I would be prepared to pay for. So I always find, and it's quite tricky because that's also quite different to the way that Ethereum expects you to do it. When you've got this massive database that just grows in size and anybody can post anything onto it, that's not going to work. This is why Ethereum is so massive and bloated and nobody can run it, and that's fine. It's incredibly powerful, there's no denying that, but it completely breaks the paradigm that everybody can run everything. And what's interesting is that if you think about this beforehand, and if you realize that this is what you're working with, it's perfectly possible to do all of the things that I see out there. But actually, you need to realize when you write the application that this is the way that you have to write it. It's actually a peer-to-peer. MiniDapps are frankly peer-to-peer. And then everything else is where you can start to add value and add services and this sort of stuff. There is always the expertise is valuable. Yeah. When I try to explain this to you, it's like MySQL database is free. Yeah, they put the source code up there. They let you download it for free. They make loads of money. How do they make money from this totally free application that they let you download? Because they're experts. And when you're a business and when you want to use MySQL, you don't just download it and use it yourself. You ring them up and you say, look, I'm a business. I want someone to scream at. I want someone to look after my servers. I want you to set it up correctly. That expertise has value. So if the MiniDapp that you're writing, sure, use it. It's totally for free. You've got all the source code. There's still loads of ways that people, would go to you and say, hey, you're the expert in this. Can you help me set it up for my business? They've got Nike, Coca-Cola, Reebok. They want to use the NFT generation application you've got. They're not going to get their techs to do it without speaking to, a reliable, successful, good business. And frankly, what it sort of means is that you need to be good. Yeah, which sort of makes sense. The cream will rise to the top. The businesses that provide better services will make more money. It is not the case that you can just be usury and extract value from the situation because you were the first there. You would extract value from the situation because you're the best, because you wrote it. Obviously, you know more about it than anybody else. And in fact, with maybe Jazz can go through some of the MiniDapps that we're going to be writing. There's lots of different ways that you could write these MiniDapps. There's lots of different ways that you could construct the system. And you need to think about this at the very beginning when you're writing it. So Jazz, can you maybe just mention a couple of the different ideas that we've got floating around, and we'll just have a little open discussion about maybe how we would attack that problem.
Are you talking about kind of existing MiniDapps that we have? So like Future Cash, for example?
So what are the apps that have we got? Some apps that we're going to give them? We're going to ask people to do. I mean, first, sorry, just one thing. Do you feel that? Does anybody have anything that they would like to ask or say before we go into that about what I've just said? You don't have to, but if anybody do chip in,
in
if
case
you
he
have
wants
something.
to talk, I unmuted him. But
okay, yeah, no, cool. I can hear I can hear the Spanish TV again. It's back on. Joshua, can't you turn your TV off? No, I can hear your radio.
My TV off.
Or you can just mute your microphone, Joshua. You can mute your microphone in the bottom left, next to your name.
One of the ideas
That also works. There you go.
App, so being able to track the journey of goods or files, so that it can be used in something like supply chain or farming, and tracking from source to destination.
Okay.
From field to fork.
Okay, so let's just do a little quick. I'm going to do a quick brainstorm. Do chip in if anybody wants to. But for instance, so a supply chain, track and trace. How could you do this? So the simplest way, easiest way, would just be to say we'll do an on-chain transaction every time somebody moves it. Yeah. So I create an NFT. I create a token which somehow represents this item, this bucket of mozzarella, whatever it is. And then when I give it to somebody, I actually give them the NFT and I do it on chain. You could do that. That's one way of doing it. Every step along the way. Now imagine there's 100,000 of these things. Imagine actually people think, oh, this is really useful, I'll use it. I've got 100,000 products I'm gonna do this on. That's clearly not going to work, is it? Because you can't put these things, we can't do hundreds of thousands of these things every day, 10 different, stops every 6 hours, that's going to clog up the entire chain. So how else could you do it? Well, just thinking about this, one way you could do it is you could actually have maybe a hash tree, and what you could do is you could add an entry into the hash tree, and then you could prove with a Merkle path to a root that everybody had got. You could put a signature in that. There's no limit to the amount of data you can put into a leaf node of a hash tree. I don't know if any of you have played with the MMR create and the MMR proof functions on Minima. Yeah, these hash trees are really very powerful. And then you could maybe do one transaction at the beginning, at the end. Yeah, and all the intermediary steps would simply be hash tree entries, which would be some sort of state variable that you would add to the transaction at the very end. Again, not perfect. It still requires a transaction on chain for it to be done. But you could then have as many steps as you wanted in between, and you could provably prove that each of those people had added a signature to the hash tree with a Merkle path. Interestingly, people wouldn't know the other entries. They would only need to know the hash of the leaf node to provide the Merkle path. So you could actually make it so that other people wouldn't know what other people had put into it. But you could take another step back, and you could provide this as a service and say, well, look, we actually do this timestamping system, and you as a company can have one output, and then all of your different items that you want to track would all be using the same hash tree. And so actually, if you had thousands of these things, you could put all of them into this single hash tree in this single UTXO, and then you could close it at the end of the day. You could have had, tens of thousands of items with tens of millions of different parsings from this guy to that guy to the next guy, put it all into a hash tree, and then bang it online, bang it in the chain with one at the end. And basically what you've done then is you've done an entire company, and all of its items that were being tracked could be tracked by that single UTXO. So whenever you're trying to come up with these things, you need to think, okay, yes, I can do it on chain, but how would I do it if I wasn't going to go on chain? None of this actually, goes to the root way of doing this, which is that you would do it on layer 2 via Omnia. You would do it on layer 2 using L2. Mbor's written a very nice application that starts to do that. That's quite, that's clearly the end game, in my honest opinion. Minima has an incredibly powerful version of Lightning. It uses the L2 mechanic, which was not generated by Minima. That was written by Decker and some very, very smart people, which is where we'd like the Lightning Network to be. But in fact, what the Lightning Network on Minima gives you is it gives you the ability to do any sequence of transactions with any subset of users and coins off-chain. And so I may have 20 steps to my system. So, even think, you could buy it, I like to think of it as a poker game, and I always refer to the poker game because I believe that its complexity is enough to show the capability to do anything. If you could write a layer 2 poker game, then frankly, you could do anything. But imagine you wanted to buy a house, and so you put the money in, you put the lawyer's in there as well with his signature. Then that gets put into a smart contract that waits for the surveyor to say, yes, I've got it. And then there's a 10 grand payment which says, look, this is non-refundable if you want to go on. And then as long as I get the report back from the registry office that the house is yours, it definitely goes through. You could do that as a stage sequence of transactions where everybody knows exactly what's happening. Now, you could do all of that on chain. Yeah, you could say, look, I'll do a transaction, so I've put it into a smart contract. Now I need the surveyor to sign something, and it'll move on to state 2. And in state 2, we need to get a 10 grand deposit from you. And then once you've done that, we'll go to state 3, and then we need to get the registry office to say that you actually own the property and that there's nothing wrong. But from that stage, as long as they say that that's okay, then you definitely get to buy the house. So you could do all of that on chain, but what you could also do is you could just start it off as an L2 transaction at the front, and then you could do all of those transactions off chain. So all it basically means is that you basically do the transaction, but you sign it and you do it and you have a valid At every stage along the L2 path, you have the valid transaction that you could post on chain, but you don't post on chain. That's really the trick that L2 does. It means I do it exactly the same way. It's exactly the same smart contracts, and we go through each of the stages, but instead of actually posting the transaction, I don't. And what L2 gives you is the ability to say that you can't post any previous transaction. It's always the latest transaction that has to be the valid one on chain. The way it does that is that if you do post any of the previous valid transactions, I can always add mine to the end. So it just means that whatever sequence of transactions we're doing off chain, the latest one is always the one that can finally be put on chain, and that is what is happening. So even if somebody tries to play silly buggers off chain, I can always just jump down on chain, and then it's like, right, there's a 12-hour limit on this, and if you don't do it, then I'm going to take back my deposit, and everything gets cancelled. So if anybody starts mucking about with L2 stuff, that's very, very interesting, and I'd love to help you with how you do that. I don't know if anybody remembers coin flip, the very simple game I'd written on the previous MiniDapps system, but that's exactly the sort of thing you could write and just do infinite numbers of goes between two players of just flipping a coin and then just paying, and he'd go up and then he'd go down, etc., etc. So that's a different paradigm, frankly. That's a very nice, that's the ultimate aim, that's the final goal. But that really allows you to do just about anything with a subset of users and a subset of coins. In fact, if I had to be more specific, what I'd say is that the thing about Lightning is that it basically gives us infinite transactions per second. Yeah, there's no limit to how fast two peers can do transactions over Lightning, except the limitations imposed by the speed of the hardware they're using. But you don't get the liquidity of users. You don't get a pool with 1 million users. That's where the sidechains come in. So if you're ever wondering what would I do on a sidechain and what would I do on Lightning, Lightning is peer-to-peer. Lightning is subset of users, subset of coins, infinite transactions per second. But as soon as I want a pool of users, as soon as I want 1 million users to put all their money into something and we all start interacting with that, that's not something you can do on L2. That's something that you would do on another blockchain, on a sidechain. Yeah, that's how I see this paradigm going. You will have Minima as your base layer. Minima is the money. Minima is, where you actually keep your wealth. And then either you'll be doing quick, fast stuff over L2, or you'll be jumping onto side chains to access massive pools of users. I mean, interesting. You could write a side chain as a MiniDapp. There could be a way of doing that. I have thought about that.
What if somebody wanted to do a DeFi
sorry.
app, so lending and borrowing?
Yeah. So, flash loans. Flash loans is a one. I do a little example of that. So what you really get on Minima is UTXOs, yeah? And so you could write a UTXO. In fact, I think I put the script into the dev channel. So let's say there was a DEX. Somebody had written a DEX, and each UTXO was an order in the DEX. The reason, for instance, when you're doing small amounts, you want to do it all off chain, you want to do this, yeah, and that's fine. If you wanted to do a fast DEX for small amounts, you don't want to be going on chain, it's expensive and slow. But if you wanted to do a big amount, if you were like saying, I've got 1 million Minima, or I got, a serious amount of money for a serious amount of some stable coin that's running on Minima, then fine, maybe you would put that on chain. An on-chain DEX would work, I feel, for large amounts. It just wouldn't work for small amounts. So you've got a DEX that's running on chain. Every UTXO is an order. Yeah, like in the tutorial where I say, look, a very simple script says, you can spend me as long as you send this much to my address. So if I have a token, I have Spartacus coin, and I send 1 million Spartacus coin to an address, and the address doesn't require a signature. The address simply says, verify out, yeah, return verify out, check that the opposite output is 10 Minima to Paddy's address. That's the script I've set it to. That's an order in an order book. Interestingly, you'd probably need, if you wanted to have those online, because on Minima you only keep all the chain for 24 hours, you'd want a book where it had all the coin proofs. Minima has the export coin, import coin function. What that does is it exports the MMR proof of those coins so that other users can import them and then access them and use them in their transactions. So you could do an on-chain DEX where you posted an offer on-chain and you put the coin proof and updated the coin proof every 12 hours on some order book, and then everybody would be able to see all of the coins that were available on the chain from whenever in the past to now that they could access in their transactions. Now somebody says, well, look, I'm not interested in buying or selling these things, but I am interested in providing liquidity. I want to provide a flash loan for you to be able to do this stuff. So what do? So you take your 1,000 minima and you send it to an address, and all that address says is return verify out that the opposite address is my amount times 1.01 to the same address, same token, same amount. And so all I'm saying is, look, I'll give you 1,000 minima as long as you give me 1,010 minima in the same transaction. I give you 100 minima, and you can spend this output as long as the opposite output is 101 minima back to the same address. That's a flash loan. That means for that single transaction, you can use that output as long as you pay me 1%. And what's interesting is that if you see an arbitrage opportunity between there's different UTXOs. I'm selling 100 Spartacus coins for 100 Barry coins, and then I'm going to send 100 Barry coins for 200 Jazz coins, and then I'm going to sell 200 Jazz coins for this. You can put all of those in one transaction. Interestingly, any sequence of trades, you can squash them up and you can put them all into one transaction. You don't have to do them sequentially. If you think about it, as long as I'm paying Baz and then Baz is paying Jazz and then Jazz is paying me back, that's totally fine. And as long as the sum of the inputs is greater than the sum of the outputs, it works. You don't have to do them in separate transactions. Now let's say that I don't have the minima. I see an ARB opportunity. Look, I could buy this one and then sell it here. And then when I sell that, I'd actually end up with more. I don't have the money to buy that first one. I'll take a flash loan. I'll take this UTXO. He gives me 1,000 minima. Cool. I've got 1,000 minima, but he expects 1,010 at the end of this transaction. No problem. I take the 1,000. I buy the Barry. I use that to buy the Jazz. I use the Jazz to buy me, and then at the end of it, I pay myself back and I pay the flash loan back. So you could do a flash loan system in a single transaction to do an arbitrage over a sequence of UTXO order books. So that's one way of doing it. If you're talking other systems, then there probably will have to be some repository where you store this information. So if you wanted to do some other type of DeFi protocol, you're not going to be able to stuff all of that information on chain. You're going to have some repository, some externality to the system where actually information is kept. And what you want to make it that information is trustless. What you want is that I can see that information and objectively make my own mind as to whether I'm going to do a transaction without you being able to, screw me over in any way. That's the real trick. Yeah, what you want is to have any information that is required for your DeFi protocol to work, to be accessible offline, but for me never to have to trust you. So if you give me the coin proofs of the coins that I should use for this, either they're valid or they're not. It shouldn't be possible for you to feed me invalid information. I should be able to prove the information you're giving me is the information I need for me to do what it is that I need to do. And in fact, that is probably where you would extract your value, because it's like, well, I actually have an order book with millions of users use my order book, whereas only 100 users use this one. Cool, I'll use the one with millions of users. Oh, you're providing a terrible service. Your website's always down and I can't access it. I'll switch over to this one. They're running a much better service, so I'll use them for doing that. So it doesn't have to be on-chain, the information. What I notice is that a lot of information is stored on Ethereum, which doesn't need to be stored on Ethereum. Yeah, you don't need to put that on chain. This is objective information that I can look at and I can make up my mind, with reference to stamp D, with reference to the shopping thing. You don't need to put the price of, you don't need to do everything. You don't need to put the location of the shop and every single thing on chain. But I need somewhere where I can see that information, and I need somewhere where I can then decide whether I'm going to buy this pencil for 1 minima on this shop, or if I'm going to buy it for 0.9 minima on this shop. That's fine. And then either that transaction will go through or it won't. I don't have to have all of that on chain. You don't need to put all of that information on an expensive, clunky database.
If some of this is going over your head, then
So
don't worry
yeah,
for now. You can head to the build section on the docs website, and Paddy's tutorial is there, and you can go step by step through his tutorial, and then hopefully some of what we've talked about today will make sense. So just to recap for some of you who joined late, over the next week or so, we will be putting out a couple of surveys where you can select a MiniDapp that you would like to build, or alternatively, you can come up with your own, and we will kind of evaluate each of those individually to come up with.
sorry, just to say on that point, so primitives is what we're looking for. We're looking for primitive components that allow you to do specific things that you could then use in multiple different ways. Yeah, but when I think of MiniDapp, I think of a primitive, and I think, what does this primitive do? Sorry, Jazz, I'm just gonna have a very quick rant about Future Cash now. Okay, so we released we haven't got the Future Cash app. Is it on the store? Is it on? No, they haven't got it. Pity. Okay, so we've got a very simple MiniDapp, which does something very, very simple. It takes your money and it sends it to a time lock. That's all it does. So I take my 10 Minima and I send it to you, and I say you can only access it in a week's time. And you think, God, that's not very, what am I going to use that for? And actually, we're finding that we can use it for loads of things. Just that very simple ability to do that allows you to do vesting contracts. It allows you to do, delayed payment sequences for people, so they have to do work and then you get it. And so actually, what I'm trying to say is that you'd be surprised how much you can do with simple primitives. Sometimes I think there's an over complexity added to some of these DeFi protocols, when actually, insurance contracts, you could do very simple insurance contracts on Minima using UTXOs. How would you do an insurance contract? Well, I'd have to send money to a contract, and that contract would have to say, for insurance, there's some sort of externality involved. Let's say I'm insuring against the weather getting too hot. I don't know, a score in a football game or something. You're going to have an oracle tell you that information. There's no way around the oracle problem. Minima gives you the check sig function. And so what you could say is that if this hash, which is the hash of the scenario that I'm insuring myself against. So Manchester United beat Everton 3-0. If BBC Sports signs this, then you can claim this output, then this output can return to you. So actually, in a it's a very precise, concise language. The KISS VM, that scripting with some very simple, contracts, you can actually do some really complex stuff. See, then what you could do is you could actually have a DEX for insurance contracts. So you could have a template for an insurance, and you could say, look, this is the event that I'm insuring against. And then different insurers could price that differently, and you could actually trade those, as UTXOs. And I would obviously buy, because since I know that the contract is paying the certain amount on the output of, the signature of this event, he wants me to put in this much, he wants me to put in less. I'll take this one because they both they're both exactly the same, just that this one cost me less than that one. So actually, with that primitive, I can suddenly have a DEX for different insurance contracts, and that could be hosted on some,
Does the oracle need to know that they're the oracle in your insurance example?
So you'd have to pick an oracle, but you could have more than one oracle. You could say 2 of 3 oracles have to agree. So that would be a service.
They would have to do.
So they would have to say, I'm prepared to sign. So for instance, I'm prepared to sign. Sorry, I've got a Bluetooth headset, and every time Discord crashes, I have to reconnect my Bluetooth headset. Sorry, Mothri, but for instance, if you were doing a derivative product, a financial product, so you were doing a contract which said, look, I want to know what the price of Minima is in US dollar, and if it's more than this, then I get this, and if it's less than this, then I get this. You would need an exchange to say, well, every 2 hours we sign the current price of Minima in US dollar in this format. So I have a string which says this is the current price of Minima in US dollar, and I sign it with a colon date, the block number. And you could take that and you could add it as a state variable to your contract, and the contract could check the signature against the public key of the exchange. And then you could write loads of derivative, you could write all your different contracts that relied on, the price of Minima in US dollar using that. And maybe you might say, well, actually, we don't trust one single exchange, so I'm going to take the average of 3 exchanges. So I need to add 3 pieces of data to the transaction, and then the smart contract will take the average of all those 3. And if that number is bigger than this, then I make my money, and if it's less, then you win and you take the money. So the Oracle problem is not, that is, when you want to link the real world to the digital world, you're going to need someone in the real world to tell you what's happening. There's no way around that. But they are incentivized to do it correctly. They could say you can only use that if you pay me for, you could add extra functionality to the smart contract that said you can only use me if you pay them. So the Oracle could say, look, you're only allowed to use this, and if you're giving me 5 Minima every time you use me in a smart contract. So there is an incentive for the Oracle as well, and then they have to do a good job. And if they don't do a good job, you'll stop using them because they're crap. Yeah, and you could say, well, actually, I want to use the average of Bitfinex and Kraken, and I want to use BitMEX. That's how Uniswap does it, and they try to use as many oracles as possible. But like I said, very simple primitives that then allow you to do more complicated things. And frankly, it's more a question of how you display this information to the user. Frankly, the majority of the work goes into the front-facing aspect of it, the user experience, the UE. And then there's like a few things you do down on low level on Minima, with a few little simple primitives that do these things. And that's the complexity, actually, I have found in writing these MiniDapps. We've got these, it's a future cache, very, very simple, quite a lot of code to get the front end working. Just this ability to send money to the future, and check that it's there, and then send it to other people, and then ask them for an address and make it pretty and make them understand how to use it. You've got to understand that a lot of people are not technical and can't understand these things. So there's a lot of complexity hidden in the UX and the UE, as opposed to the hardcore smart contracty stuff that you're sort of doing.
How do 5 or 6 or 8 or n primitive MiniDapps that are supposed to interact with each other in order to give an experience for a user? How would they? Am I thinking of it in the wrong way? Do they interact with each other? Do they not feel like separate MiniDapps when you're using them?
Yeah, I suppose if you're saying there's the wallet,
and
which is one MiniDapp, and then we've got this other MiniDapp, which is Future Cash, which sends money to the future. Would it be possible to integrate, Future Cash into the wallet? Or another example, sorry, it's just, I don't know if any of you have mucked about with Max Solo. Yeah, just to say that there's a load of MiniDapps that you could write that don't actually do anything on Minima, that just interact over Maxima. Yeah, this sort of information layer that we've got going on top of Minimum, which I have to say is running pretty stably at the moment. And what I'd like to do is to be able to, so we have this HTLC swap, and currently in Maxima, you can in Max Solar, you can say, look, I want to send you some money, and that is done by Maxima, isn't it? That is done by Max Solar, but what you'd want is actually, I'd like you to open, I call it stacking dApps. What you want to do is you want it to open another MiniDapp with some variables. And says, well, look, I'm about to do a swap with you, but I initiated that whole process from Max Solo. Haven't actually, other than actually opening it currently, we don't have the ability to open. This is for security reasons, because of the read-write permissions. But I'm adding a feature to the MDS which allows you to open one MiniDapp from another MiniDapp in a secure way. But also, I suppose what you could do is, if you write these as what these MiniDapps are is basically implementations of protocols. What I mean by that is that Max Solo is a chat app that runs over Maxima. Great. I've written a version, the horrific version that you look at when you currently see it, the one I've written in basic HTML and JavaScript, no colors, nothing. That's my version. 2 days, I won't take any, that's why it looks like that. We've got another version now that Arnis has written that looks beautiful, that implements the same protocol, but looks totally gorgeous. And my app and his app can chat. And so actually, when you're trying to write these applications, what you want to do is you need to realize that somebody else could take this application, change the UE, change the GUI, change it all, make it look totally different, and it would still be able to interact with your one, because what they're both doing is they're both implementations of a protocol, a MiniDApp protocol. So StabD for you, sir, for Mothri, for what you're doing, it's like you're going to write the first implementation of the StabD protocol. But somebody else could obviously take that MiniDApp and say, look, I don't like the colors he's using here, and I don't want this. I want the button here, and I want that to do here, and I'd like another feature, which is blah, 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 blah. But actually, they'd both be talking the same protocol. Yeah, you're not writing an application.
What if we wanted to have essentially the same functionality as Max Solo or whatever Anis has built?
Yeah,
inside our MiniDApp, would it be done like that, or would it be open up securely Max Solo, or could we run a kind of?
I think the best way to do it is to open up. I think the best way is not to reproduce exactly the same functionality in one MiniDApp that you have in another MiniDApp.
Sure. Yeah.
So that bridge is really what we're looking for. That ability to use multiple MiniDApps in a sequence of events to do. So as you say, look, I want to buy an item on your shop. Okay, let's start up a Max Solo conversation between me and the shop seller. So that we can talk about price or something. I think it would be best if you used, because then any improvements that are made to Max Solo, you benefit from. So without you having to then crowbar all of that back into your application. I agree that that's currently clunky, because you'd actually have to say, open Max Solo. Let's talk about Max Solo. So what you really want is one click, open. And once we get that going, then you can start stacking these dApps, and using them, together. But I would probably not try and crowbar massive amounts of code from different MiniDApps into.
It's kind of possible, but not particularly elegant.
It's currently possible, but not elegant. I agree. But each MiniDApp should be really doing a specific thing. It should be implementing it should be doing one little thing, and then you can use the whole sequence of them, and you can use all of them to do whatever it is that you're trying to do. I would say that would be a better paradigm, because then you benefit from all the improvements that everybody makes to each of the individual MiniDApps in the stack.
And we're comfortable with a level of centralization where censorship doesn't matter. So you talk about having an address book or servers, or presumably there's not a dogmatic no centralization. It's no.
No, you can build a centralized system. No, absolutely. And the point is, though, that if you do start censoring if you have your order book, and you say, we have an order book, but we don't allow Tornado Cash. If you were to do that, then somebody might set up an order book that does allow it. And then the free market would determine whether people felt that what you were offering with censorship was worth more or less than what somebody else was offering without it. So you would still have to provide a good service. You would still, you are providing a service, and I can choose on whether to use that service or not. Frankly, Coinbase is a completely centralized system that runs on top of a decentralized, hopefully decentralized systems. And it's a great solution. For many people, it is the solution. They're simply not capable of dealing with their own private keys and whatnot. I'm not going to bitch at Coinbase. They've lost less Bitcoins than people who had to keep their own keys. So frankly, from an now, whether that means that they could be taken, whether people think, no, that's the wrong way to think about it, because the government could take all their money. Well, they haven't yet. And Coinbase are clearly incentivized not to do that. They're a fully functioning business that makes loads of money. They're incentivized to help you out. There's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want. There are security implications to all the decisions you make. There are simplicities and complexities that you have to evaluate for yourself. So no, it is not the case that all centralization is bad. Centralization is incredibly efficient. It's incredibly good at certain things, but it is the case that you don't want that on your base layer. You can build this stuff on top of a decentralized system, fine, but you can't build a decentralized censorship-resistant system on top of a centralized system. It's unfortunate, but that's not the way it works. So you can build your shop, your SnapD collection of shops, or the MNS server we were discussing, the maximum name service, so that people always know where you are on the network without having to worry about you. Many of you may have noticed that sometimes you lose your connections on Maxima. So what would be nice is if we had a sort of DNS system for Maxima called MNS, And then you could even do things like I'm Spartacus.min, yeah, and I use the .min server, and I always tell the .min server where I am, because if they screw me over, then I'll just stop using them. You know, the point about this is that I can choose whether or not to use them. I'm not forced to use them. When the base layer is centralized, then I'm forced to use that system. Whereas when a system is built on top of a decentralized censorship-resistant system that is centralized, if I don't want to use it, I don't have to. That's really the difference. So it's up to you to provide me a service that's good enough, clean enough, efficient enough, useful enough for me to think, yeah, I'll use it. You know, why not? I mean, do you really need censorship-resistant Ethereum to trade monkey JPEGs? I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm waiting for Ethereum.com. Yeah, when Ethereum.com appears, where they're just going to say, no, we're not running it on a blockchain. We're just going to run the EVM, just the EVM. And as soon as you send me a transaction, I'm going to process it instantly. And I'm going to get 1,000 times throughput, probably more. I'm going to get 1,000 times cheaper transactions, but you can run all the contracts you can. You can do your monkey JPEGs. You can do your wrap Bitcoin to US dollar T. You know, do you do Tornado Cash? No, we don't. Okay, all right. I have to do that somewhere else. Yeah, that's fine. You know, I understand you can't do that on your centralized system because the government's breathing down your back. All right. You know, I can make a decision about whether I want to use your system or not. You know, is 1,000 times cheaper, 1,000 times throughput worth, valuable enough to me to not worry about the fact that I can't interact with the dark web? Fine, you know, then I will.
We could listen all day. It's very
if you see what I mean.
Does anyone else have any questions before we leave it there? We'll be in touch in the community dev channel over the next week or so. Are there any other questions? Okay. Any final words, Luke, Paddy, Adam?
Devs. Good luck, I'd say. And yeah, sorry, I do try to be in the dev channels as much as I can. It's there's quite a few different things going on in my world at the moment, and so I'm sorry if I'm not in there as much as I should be, but I do try to answer. You know, the more technical the question, the more likely I am to get involved, frankly, because they just ping me and say, what's the answer to this? And I'm like, okay. And then I jump on, I have a little chat about it. But I will try and be in there as often as I can and, help you in any way that I can. But yeah, protocols, not applications. Decentralized MiniDapps implement protocols. Imagine somebody else can rewrite your MiniDapp and just implement the same protocol. How to extract value out of protocols. There's lots of ways of doing it. They're just not as obvious. You know, you need to provide a service, you need to provide liquidity of some sort. Yeah, that's the way.
No, I just was loving listening to all of this. Is very clear now what the goals are of this particular phase of our development is. So equally, Paddy is available, but equally, please talk amongst yourselves, and if there is questions that you think you can get amongst other community members, that's the whole point now. I mean, you are the core team of followers and supporters, but we hope it would spread further than this. So if you've got ideas, rather than just always turn to Paddy or Elias, do ask questions to each other and feed up ideas and test things amongst yourselves. But we are incentivizing this with coins, so ultimately you will benefit from getting involved, and hopefully the incentivization is enough to make it profitable when we go to mainnet. But this is the time now to let your good ideas come, and as I said, try and interact with others, and if you know developers who've got an hour a day or an hour a month, and that's really what we're after. Good ideas to come and be tested.
Channel, the Dev Grants team find a channel if you are looking for different kind of skills. I know.
So many channels. Like, even I get confused. I can't find anything in the channels. Yeah. There's like 50 channels. I'm like, ugh. Right.
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you to everyone that's come today. It's really exciting to see you here, and just a reminder that this has been a recorded call, and we will be putting it up in the community dev channel shortly should you want to watch it back or if you've missed anything. And yeah, to what Adam said, if there's any other developers that'd be interested in learning to build on Minima, please do invite them along. Have
Sorry.
coins with hype.
Yeah, good. Sorry, I just wanted to say another thing on the MiniDapps system itself. Clearly knowledgeable audience here. If you feel there is something in the MiniDapps system itself that could do with changing, for instance, this ability to open other MiniDapps from a MiniDapp. It sounds simple, but it's because of the UID. I don't want to get the security implications of knowing the user ID of a right application tricky. That's why I can't just whack it in and just say, look, here's a link to that. Obviously, I could add that in one minute, but it's not secure. So if there's any features that you would like to see in the MiniDApp system, or you feel that some features aren't good or don't work or whatever, that's also, I'd love to hear about that.
Okay, thank you everyone. That was a very good session.
Yes.
And yeah, we look forward to the next few weeks. Cheers,
Thanks
guys.
very much. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, bye.